Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Financial Advisors Want to Know podcast. Today, I have Nancy Hetrick on the show, and our topic is going to be talking about how when clients divorce, what the advisor's role needs to be. Nancy has a deep background in this topic. She is a CDFA and MAFF, is the founder and CEO of Smarter Divorce Solutions and the Divorce Financial Planner Training Center, as well as a financial planner with Strategic Portfolio Solutions. So she has both the experience of training advisors on how to deal with these divorce issues and workshops for that, as well as being a financial planner herself and dealing with these issues. And she's also a certified divorce financial analyst. So welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This is it's a really important topic and becoming more and more important with financial advisors because it's our key demographic that's being impacted.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. What kind of trends have you been seeing in the past couple of years with, we were talking a little bit pre-show, the gray wave. Can you talk to that a little bit of like trends that you've been seeing recently and what you think might be going into that?
Yeah, absolutely. And really, this all kind of came to play in about 2004. There was a shocking report from AARP that showed that there had been a dramatic increase in the rate of divorce for people over 40. And then shortly after that report came out, Bowling Green did another study, and they actually revealed that from 1990 to 2010, the divorce rate for people over age 50 had doubled. And so
Wow.
they leave it to the baby boomers. The baby boomers have rewritten history at every phase of their lives. And this is just another one. That as these couples have gotten into their 50s and 60s, the divorce rate is astronomical. And it is definitely the highest rate of divorce of every demographic. Now, a lot of people will say, well, part of that is because young people, those in their 20s and 30s, are not getting married anymore. This is our first generation of children of divorce who think that they can protect themselves from divorce by not getting married, which scares me to death because they're living together, they're having children together, and they have none of the legal protections of marriage. So that's another topic for another day. But for today, for most financial advisors, we're really going to see it with our baby boomer clients, those folks that are over age 50.
Yeah, and I'd say like a good place maybe to start is, so for going into an advisor's shoes of you have this relationship with these, married couple, and you start to feel that things are brewing. Where do you think that they need to kind of start to step into things? Like what's the best when, that pre-divorce phase, if you can tell things are starting to go sideways, and then the active, no, it's going to happen. Now we just need to plan for the plane landing and hopefully not crashing. Right. Can you speak to kind of that initial phase that advisors might, be in and just unsure of where to start now that they can sense it's coming?
Yeah, it's very delicate, right? Especially if you have a relationship with both people. You want to be supportive, you want to be encouraging, but you have a fiduciary responsibility. If you're either a CFP or an RIA, if you're a fee-only advisor, you've got that fiduciary responsibility to both clients. So you really have to be careful and cautious about not giving any advice whatsoever. In fact, one of the things I tell financial advisors is help get connected with the team of professionals that they need. And that's where you can really get educated on what are the different ways to get a divorce. A lot of people are not even aware that there is not one law on the books in any of the 50 states that says you have to have an attorney to get a divorce. And in fact, it's getting to the point where it's easier and easier and easier to do a do-it-yourself divorce in pretty much every state in the union. Now, for most of our clients, that's not going to be the best situation because they typically have fairly complicated financial situations. So trying to do it themselves is probably going to be fraught with peril of what they didn't know. So I typically am trying to help those clients consider out-of-court options, mediation, collaborative divorce, and working with someone like myself who's a trained financial specialist to help them think creatively about their divorce settlement so that both of them get to keep more of their own money. And so if you can reach out in your community and find the practicing CDFAs in your city, you can partner with them really, really effectively. I know also the Code of Ethics, if you're a CFP, has some pretty stringent requirements that if you find out your clients are going to be divorcing, you're pretty much, your hands are tied. You can't give advice to either one of them. during the
Yeah.
pendency of the divorce. And so at that time, typically the assets are frozen. You don't make any changes in the investments until after the settlement is all negotiated and worked out. Unless, of course, it's by mutual agreement of the parties. And that's a nice place to be as well.
Yeah. And so I guess, probably a big part of the conversation is, you have to get people who know what they're doing in the right seats. And so I get the sense, as an advisor, kind of your role in the situation is to kind of not stick your foot in it. So what are common things that you've seen in experience of ways that, advisors who aren't well educated in this space might take an action that they, out of, just not knowing, can cause problems, or things that you've seen where it's, oh, I wish they had just known this, or I wish that they, would have done this differently or consulted us. What are common mistakes that you see people make in this process that, if everybody could just take one thing away from the show, don't do this, or, don't say this, like, what would be your, your feedback for that of how to avoid making mistakes in this process?
Well, it really brings to mind a very specific case that I was on. It was actually a collaborative divorce case, which we can talk about that if you want to. But in this case, it was a very high net worth couple. And one of the things that, as a financial neutral, one of the things I specialize in is creative settlement solutions that are tax optimized and can really help achieve the goals that the couple has in ways that attorneys and courtrooms would never typically even consider. And so I'm looking at a much deeper level of financial analysis than is typical in a divorce. So in this particular case, the couple had retirement assets, and then they had a large, almost $3 million brokerage, after-tax account. Well, that after-tax account had also been divided into 3 accounts, where there was one account that was individual stocks and basic investments, and then 2 other accounts that were separately managed accounts. So they were put with money managers, right? And as any of you advisors know, when you have an account with a money manager, it might have anywhere from 30 to 50 individual holdings. So complicated accounts, right? And I had worked up this beautiful creative solution to save this couple. It was well over $100,000 in taxes. And the wife was a typical non-CFO spouse, where it was not her role in the household to manage the finances. And it's often typical that the one party that's not the CFO in the family, they tend to be very directed and influenced by fear of their future, fear of making a mistake, of making a bad choice because they weren't informed. So they can sometimes get too much advice from too many people who really don't know what they're talking about. So once we had this proposed settlement solution, and actually she didn't even take the solution, she just went and wanted to have a meeting with her financial advisor. So she took her attorney and went and had a meeting with the financial advisor. And the financial advisor said, oh, you don't want to disrupt this portfolio. You want to make sure that you just divide every single holding 50-50. So each of you walk away with exactly the same portfolio. Well, I understand why he was making that recommendation to her, but he was making that recommendation in a tunnel, right? Without the big picture, without understanding any of the other stuff going on. And when she returned to the negotiation table, she was 100% anchored on, but my financial advisor told me this is what has to be done. So as much as I could explain, as much as I could illustrate what the benefits were of doing it differently, she couldn't hear it. And so ultimately ended up costing her about $100,000, because at the end of the day, any money that doesn't go to Uncle Sam for taxes is money that couple would have had available to divide. And so it really cost her a significant amount of money.
As a tax planner, that's just so painful to hear. When it's, because that's, for them, that was probably meaningful money, right?
Absolutely.
$100,000 split in
that's
half.
$100,000. That's meaningful. I don't care how much you have. That's real money.
Yeah. And then where it's just pure tax waste like that, just because you didn't do the dispositions efficiently. That's so painful. So and that's why it's probably important too, like when you get into these situations with advisors who aren't, as experienced with the nuanced issues, particularly with the tax optimization that goes on. What do you think they should have in mind when they're dealing with a CDFA, or once they've gotten that team in place, like how they should see their role, and where are they in the conversation, and what kind of feedback do you have? If you could have had this advisor talk to you first, or be talking to this person in the past, what would you have wanted them to hear?
I would have loved to have talked to that advisor and given him the context of what we were actually looking at and assured that person that, look, you're not going to lose the assets. They're going to stay with you. But by doing this other strategy, doing it a little bit differently, your client's actually going to be much better off. And so my advice for advisors is know what divorce process the clients are using. If the clients have lawyered up, if they both have attorneys, and that's the only professionals involved, then you know what? When it comes to the finances, you're probably the smartest person in the room. And if you've worked with both people, you cannot give them advice during that divorce, right? It would be a conflict of interest to talk to either one of them. So you really have to kind of wash your hands of it. And that's when it can be really, really helpful if you have a CDFA in your market who practices actively and is willing to play the role of the neutral and just educate both parties on possibilities. That's the ideal. Doesn't always happen that way. You might also be in a situation where you have a list of divorce resources as divorce financial analysts, marriage and family therapists, CPAs like yourself, forensic accountants, that at least you can give that to both parties and let them know, listen, don't cheap out on putting your team together. You have a significant level of net worth, and by not having the right financial experts on your team, it will ultimately cost you more money than you're saving by not wanting to hire additional professionals. So encourage your clients to put together the customized team of professionals that they need based on their situation. And that might include a business valuator, that might include real estate agents. There are certified divorce real estate agents. There are certified divorce lending professionals. These are all people that those of us that specialize in divorce have a large roster of and can make sure that people get connected with the resources that they need.
That's excellent. So I guess as we wrap up this episode, where would you like people to connect with you, Nancy? And
Well, if you're an advisor and you're interested in potentially doing more of this work, and I'll tell you, the advisors that are really successful at it are the ones that have been through their own divorces and were shocked and offended at the lack of financial education that the whole system works with. The lawyers don't know much about finance. The judges don't know anything about finance. They're not trained in finance. They will be perfectly open and honest with that. And even as a financial advisor, when I went through my own divorce, I made so many mistakes I can't even tell you. That's what led me to want to do this work. So if you feel this calling to want to help people do divorce in a better way with financial intelligence, check out the CDFA credential. Check out my training website, divorcefinancialtraining.com, and reach out to me. I'm happy to talk to you about what the different, how can you work in this field in a productive way and in a way in which you can differentiate yourself from all the other advisors in your market. It's actually a very powerful niche.
Yeah. And especially where those numbers are just going to continue to climb, as more people are retiring and realizing, hey, I don't want to spend my retirement with this other person. I think you're right about those trends and that we're going to see more of this. So it is just like a great differentiator to be able to bring that acumen to the table and be able to do that for people. So thank you so much for joining me on this episode. This was so enlightening. This is not an issue that I have to deal with personally very, very much just because we mostly do just the business tax returns. But this is just an issue that touches a lot of people's lives, and being able to be financially competent in it and emotionally competent in it is a huge thing to bring to the table for people. So thank you so much for joining me, Nancy. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.